is dominating the Sunday papers. It makes the lead in the Sunday Independent, which has an exclusive interview with Blaise and Blake O'Donnell, two of Brian and Mary Pat O'Donnell's 4 children. The headline here is, "We didn't know we were so rich." The O'Donnell children tell the Sindo that they didn't know the luxury property in Killiney had been put into a trust for them by their parents. They say their parents just wanted them to get on with life and do things and not to think that they were entitled. Over in the Irish Mail on Sunday, it's revealed that Blake O'Donnell was given control of a property in London's Canary Wharf by his father. The Mail reports that control of the office block was transferred to Blake O'Donnell shortly before his parents' failed UK bankruptcy application in 2012. And that paper also has details of a grave that Brian and Mary Pat O'Donnell bought in Mill Hill Cemetery in London. Proof, according to that paper, that they were committed to living and to dying in Britain. And also in the Mail and in the Sunday Business Post as well, they've published the architect's plans for Gorse Hill. There is other news. The Sunday Business Post lead story today reveals how the death rate for heart attack patients in small Irish hospitals is almost twice as high as in bigger hospitals. And the front page of the Sunday Times tells us that the Finance Minister, Michael Noonan, is facing questions from Independent Deputy Catherine Murphy over the sale of SiteServe, the engineering company that was installing water meters. According to the Times, the transaction resulted in a loss of over €100 million to the taxpayer and was completed just a fortnight before a new protocol that would have required the Minister for Finance to be informed about the loss-making sale. Now, to discuss these stories in more detail, I'm joined by Fianna Fáil Senator Averil, by barrister Fergal Crehan and by Brian O'Donovan, who is the financial correspondent with TV3 News. Thanks for joining me. Brian, were you part of the stakeout of Gorse Hill this week? Yeah, I thought I saw you there.
And the invasion as well with Vincent Browne. I spent the week up on windswept Gorse Hill, hence the cold I have today, and my apologies for that. I can't remember a single story dominating the agenda in the way it did for the entire week. I think it had everything, Angela. You had this luxury house, formerly wealthy people, the whole issue of repossession, the new land league, Vincent Browne storming the gates as it was described in court, and then of course at the centre of all the most magnificent property we've ever seen. I mean, it was absolutely beautiful. We took a stroll down. Before you even get through the gates, they have this bizarre post box in the shape of a gargoyle and all these seashells inserted into the masonry outside. Then these massive gates open, the remote control operated from inside in the property. Vincent Browne said, "Come on guys, let's go in." So we did. We walked down, and as someone described, even the gravel was posh. It was just pristine. The property was so well manicured, so well looked after. You had the big swimming pool, the house itself gorgeous, and as you say in the papers today, doing the architectural breakdown and the drawings of this 9,000 square foot house, 6 bedrooms, sauna, gym outside. Then you had tennis courts, swimming pool, loads of statues, sculptures. You had lions. There was a big World War I soldier, Grecian urns, these landscaped lawns sweeping down to the sea.
Could you peek in the windows and see what was inside?
Yeah, and it wasn't. And actually, it's interesting. The children who were interviewed today in the Sunday Independent point out, there was controversy during the week because Jerry Beads of the new Land League said it was a bog standard property.
Actually, I think we have some audio of Jerry Beads talking to Vincent Browne on that.
The house is very much a bog standard house. It's 15, 20 years.
What? Bog standard house.
Tony
O'Reilly has to sell Castle Martin.
Vincent, I'm not talking. I'm talking in terms of lavishness and luxury. The house is a very, very simplistic house.
A bog standard.
Bog
standard house.
There's far more luxury houses in the area.
Let's have a look.
Far more
this fella's talking about bog standard house.
Fergal Crehan, a bog standard house with statues and swimming pools and tennis courts. What's going on here?
Well, I don't know, maybe Jerry Beads has different standards to the rest of us. The Sunday Independent has gone big on this story, and it has spoken to a couple of the O'Donnell children. Well, they're grown children, and the theme is kind of the same. Bog standard house, we're not that rich.
Wear and tear, actually, is how one of them described it, that the house is suffering from wear and tear.
Yeah, and it does look shoddy. I mean, certainly the swimming pool and the tennis court looks like it might need a lick of paint, all right, which is a little shabby. And I mean, this is just genius from the Sunday Independent. Say what you like about them, they know how to sell newspapers, and they've gone big. They have a photograph of the two O'Donnell children kind of scowling out at us on the front page, and they have, to be fair, I think set them up to be taken down, because there was lots of photographs where they weren't scowling, but they put up the one where they were scowling. Blake in particular is kind of looking angrily out at the Reader. And the article's a real stitch-up. I mean, Blaze is quoted as saying, oh, you know, life was very normal. We all went to school, as if going to school somehow made you kind of one of the little people. And
I thought and them saying, there's a quote from them saying, we didn't know we were so rich. I'm living in a lavish house on the cliffs in Cloyney with Bono and Enya as your neighbours.
And I think the paper.
All of that. How do they think the rest of us live?
Yeah, I think the paper probably gave them enough rope to hang themselves. I think they were very foolish to do it. But it's you know, this is what's on the internet is called trolling. It's where you say outrageous things to get a reaction, and people are sitting at home reading the newspaper, furious, and they're saying, "I'm never buying this paper again," and they'll run out next week because the Sindo will have done something else to outrage them in a week's time. I don't particularly like it as a story, but it's a hell of a way to sell papers.
Well, you know, they're young and they grew up in that house. And I suppose what the environment that you grow up in seems normal to you, no matter what that environment is. And Averil, you know, Blaise O'Donnell does talk about leaving for work and having solicitors throw papers at her and being woken by bailiffs at 7 a.m. and them coming in and taking property out of the house and rifling through her drawers and all of this kind of carry on. That's terribly unpleasant for anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to see anybody in mortgage distress finding themselves losing their family home. But, I mean, let's be clear here. Jerry Bead said during the week that, you know, this was the same as anybody else losing their house. There's a big difference between, you know, somebody losing one of their properties, one of several properties, because of huge international financial speculation in the property market and elsewhere. And the families, there were 219 families this week in the court in Limerick on one day losing their family homes. People whose only gamble was to buy a house at the wrong time, who wanted to put a ordinary, genuinely bog standard roof over their kids' heads. So, I mean, you have to look as well at the O'Donnell, the whole background to this. And I thought Cliff Taylor had an excellent piece yesterday where he said that there seems to be a playbook for the formerly super rich, that when they end up in a situation like this before the courts, that involves international financial transactions, assets coming under the control of wives and kids, as happened here, complex webs of international transactions, trusts, lengthy court proceedings. I mean, at the end of the day, this has gone the whole way up to the Supreme Court. And they've lost, you know, and if the banks are to be in the situation to be able to do something for families who actually need it, can't be leaving people living in multi-million euro homes. I mean, of course they deserve a home over their head as much as anybody else, but they deserve the same 3-bedroom home as anybody else, not to be staking up in a huge property like this, you know. It's just, I just was probably a little bit disappointed by, I mean, I know there's a glitz effect to it. It's very interesting. I saw Vincent's piece. It was highly entertaining the other night, and I thought it was a good piece of journalism. But I genuinely felt that there are hundreds of cases now every week coming before regional courts, and those should be getting much more attention. And the reason that's happening is that the banks still have huge control. They have a veto. The government set up a personal insolvency system, to great fanfare a year or two ago. And of I think there's 118,000 mortgages in arrears. That service has only delivered 199 arrangements.
Okay. Well, I want to talk about that in detail, but first we're going to have to take a break.
The Sunday Show on 100 to 102 Today FM.
Welcome back. I'm Aingeala Flannery. You're listening to The Sunday Show. You can text your comments to 53102 and you can tweet us at Today FM Sunday or email live at todayfm.com. Now, we were discussing the battle for Gorse Hill and talking about other people who are less well off, whose houses are being repossessed and who are going through the courts. And we're talking about Limerick. Was this something you were following in TV3 during the week, Brian?
219 cases in one day in Limerick, repossession. Huge amount of coverage in today's papers about repossessions. It's as simple as this. The banks did not want to repossess properties during the crash because the property values were too low. Now that the values have come up, they're going to start repossessing. Ian Guider's a good piece in the Sunday Business Post going through the breakdown of all the different banks who gave their AIB 345 repossessions last year, B of I 200, Ulster Bank 500. Everybody expects those numbers to skyrocket this year. And then you've got all this with the background of Gorse Hill and the Land League. And there's a good analysis piece in the Times today. John Mooney, who interestingly was one of the people who invaded the property with Vincent Browne as well.
Hang on, there was 65 journalists outside that property, according to the O'Donnells.
How many journalists weren't part of the posse is probably the easier thing to ask.
Now, he gives a breakdown of the playbook and the tactics, as Averil was referring to before, that the new Land League use. They will highlight things like incorrect paperwork and try to bring up conflicts of interest with the judge and the barristers, and they'll look for little legal loopholes and little problems that they can exploit. And the piece in the Times speaks to, shall we say, maybe the better known mortgage helpers out there, if you will. David Hall of the Mortgage Holders Association, he's pointing out that, just because you point out a problem with the paperwork, it doesn't mean the debt goes away. All you've actually done is delayed it and possibly incurred more legal costs. Similar soundings coming from Carl Dieter. He says just because you prove that the paperwork is defective, it doesn't mean you get away to walk away from your loans. Although Nolene Blackwell of FLAC does point out that if you are absolutely desperate and someone like the Land League offers you what looks like a bit of hope, you will of course grab it with both hands.
But there doesn't seem to be very much hope out there for ordinary people who lost their jobs, can't pay their mortgages. We have a clip of Niall Mulligan, who was in Limerick in court this week fighting to save his home.
I bought a house that was half derelict, and basically when I got down and we're no longer in the house, and the boom went. I was in the building trade all my life, and they left me without any wages. She couldn't handle me being at home and no money in the house and all that kind of stuff.
Tell people, what's it like to come to court today under these circumstances?
Well, apart from being embarrassing and humiliating, it's quite soul-destroying. I've worked so hard, come out of school and worked so hard in the building trade, and trying to get a mortgage and going through all the troubles to get a mortgage in the first place, then for it all just be taken away.
And that was reporter David Raleigh talking to Niall Mulligan at Limerick Circuit Court earlier in this week. Fergal, listening to that, and there are thousands of people around the country in that position, yet the media is all over Gorse Hill. Should we not be paying more attention to people like Niall Mulligan?
I think so. I think the O'Donnells have done people like Niall Mulligan no favours. I think they've done the bank a great PR victory by suggesting that what repossessions are about is a bank wanting what's rightfully theirs and a bunch of spoiled brats refusing to give up something that no longer belongs to them, when in fact the situation in the vast majority of cases are much closer to Mr Mulligan's situation there. I think the new Land League and people like them have done and are continuing to do a great disservice to people like Mr Mulligan, because there are people, and you quoted David Hall, you quoted Nolene Blackwell from FLAC, who do good work helping people. I think the Land League and the Free Men on the Land and DDI and their various tentacles of the same kind of organisation are the legal equivalent of faith healers. They're quack medicine, and what they do is they pray and offer false hope to the most vulnerable. And I think, there are I volunteer in a FLAC clinic once a month, and people like me volunteer in FLAC clinics all over the country who can give you actual legal advice, not hocus pocus. And I think in some of these cases, unfortunately, there may be no winning the case, but at least you won't be making it worse by coming into court and spouting kind of formulas of words that have been given to you by charlatans. And I think this is a really serious problem. It's a very sad situation. Your heart goes out to that man listening to him, and if this is going to be happening on a much increased level in the coming months, I think this is going to be a serious problem for the country. And I think the country is entitled to turn around to the banks and say, we sorted you out when you needed sorting out. We are not going to allow you now to turn, vampire on the people of Ireland now that there's money to be made by throwing them out of their houses. And I think we have a right as a nation to say to the banks, it's payback time now.
Averil, you're nodding along passionately there with Fergal, and I know that your party during the week tabled a motion for the power of veto to be taken away from banks in personal insolvency arrangements.
Yeah, I mean, everybody should be entitled that if they end up in a mortgage difficulty, they have the opportunity to try and work it out in a sensible way, to look at different options, agreeing a longer payment term, mortgage to rent scheme, again, something the government announced with great fanfare that people could rent the home instead. I think there's only equally been 100 or so people have taken it up because the scheme is too restrictive. But at present, what's happening is the banks have a veto. So no matter how reasonable the homeowner is, they're making some repayments. They're showing that over time they'll be able to turn things around. The bank is looking, as Brian said, at rising property prices and saying, we don't care. We want to get the maximum amount we can for this asset. The result of that is that I have families onto me every week who are being made homeless. People who worked for years to pay off their mortgages, they're now in their 40s, 50s, have come on hard times and have tried to make arrangements with the banks, but the banks have said no, and they're ending up instead with the state having to pay for them in B&B accommodation, emergency accommodation, things like that in hotels. The whole thing is utterly irrational. So the bill that we put forward would remove the veto and allow a judge to decide on a basis of a number of factors what's reasonable, and to try and work out a scheme of arrangements that keeps people in their family home where at all possible.
And would you have to pay a personal insolvency practitioner for that? I mean, people don't have the couple of €1,000, they've nothing.
Yeah, we also have proposed that there should be a state service to help people with that. So at the minute there is MABS, which is a fantastic service, which is hugely under pressure. The staffing hasn't been increased. There are people like FLAC, David Hall was mentioned, Irish Mortgage Holders Organisations, all kinds of voluntary organisations. But there should be a state-backed service that can help people and just ensure that the arrangements are unfair. I mean, everybody has to be reasonable. Of course, the homeowner has to be reasonable and has to be able to work out a sustainable long-term plan. But banks shouldn't be able to veto. And what we're seeing is, as a result of that, is that different families in the same situation are being treated differently, not only by different lenders, so whether it's AIB or Bank of Ireland, but also by the same lender. So I've had several cases onto me of people who, in the same situation, same bank, have got different deals. On the basis, what Fergal said, of how strongly represented they are, how strong the case they can put forward in court, whether they know their stuff or not, whether they put up a fight. I mean, for every home that's been repossessed by the courts, there are another 3 being voluntarily surrendered. So many people are frightened out of their homes altogether before they even get to have their day in court. The whole thing is outrageous, and it's for the lack of, I have to say, political will that the government has washed its hands of this, given the banks a veto, and said, dog eat dog, strongest will survive, and not got involved. We should have a fair system that helps everybody and that ensures that, regardless of whether you can afford to pay for the best legal representation or not, you will get a fair deal, and a judge will look at a set list of criteria and work it out for you. That's what our bill was proposing, because, I mean, we're not, Fianna Fáil as well, in our approach to all this, we don't want to just criticise the government. There's a serious issue here. It's above party politics. We're offering solutions. But that hasn't been taken up, which I think is unfortunate. A lot of people out there will say that your party created a lot of the problems as well, it has to be said. But and we can argue, but we can also argue about the fact that, when during the boom, and I agree with you, the mistakes were made, but equally Enda Kenny, as leader of Fine Gael, stood on the other side of the house and shouted at the last Taoiseach, saying we weren't building enough houses, weren't doing enough, and they proposed other measures that would have overheated the property market altogether. So, I mean, genuine, I'm not interested in the petty political stuff. I have too many families onto me that need help. And that need solutions. And I think it's time for us to put aside all that, political squabbling. Doesn't keep people in their homes, and start working out realistic solutions. And that's what our family home bill was aimed at this week.
Brian, I just want to ask you about the repossession figures, but also the mortgage arrears figures that came out during the week. Because, while there was a little bit of good news in the sense that the short terms, they're down. But if you're more than 2 years in arrears, those are the people who are facing repossession, and all the property prices zooming back up again.
37,000, I think, in long-term arrears. Imagine, in arrears for 2 years. That's 2 years of stress.
But is the bank moving now because of the way we seem to be heading into another property price boom?
Property prices starting to rise once again. I mean, I've been covering bank results for years. You go, and the repossession numbers after the crash used to be extremely low because there was no point. They'd have lost money if they'd gone off and tried to sell it. They wouldn't have been able to sell it. Now they have. And the other side to all of this debate, of course, is that we own the banks. We own all of AIB, all of Permanent TSB, and 14% of Bank of Ireland. And this week, we had Richie Boucher and David Duffy coming out saying, guys, we're back in profit, we're back in the black, you're going to be able to sell your shares, you're going to get all the money back. Why? Because we're returning to normality, property prices are rising again, and unfortunately, normality and rising property prices means repossessions. It was unusual in Ireland that we were not repossessing properties and selling them again. Now we are. Now we're back in the black. And again, bringing all this back to Gorse Hill, because that has been the focus. Justine McCarthy has a good piece in the Times today talking about how, this whole Gorse Hill thing, they're doing a disservice to the others out there who are struggling. That she's pointing out the people of Ireland own 14% of Bank of Ireland after pumping $4 billion into it. It's Bank of Ireland that's trying to repossess this property. They're saying She's saying this is not a modern-day rebellion against landlords, profoundly insulting and history revisionism gone stark raving mad is how she describes it.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have to leave Gorse Hill there, and it will rumble on this week again. And just Joe in Sligo has texted in with regard to Blake and Blaise O'Donnell and said that he has yet to meet any parent who's told their children what their wealth is worth. Be honest, do any of the people on the show know what their parents are worth? Do you know about your parents' wealth?
They wouldn't tell me.
So there you go. Joe in Sligo, you're dead right.
Maybe they own. Maybe they own a house in Dalkey. They haven't told me about yet.
You're in for a pleasant surprise then, Fergal. Okay, join us after the break when we'll be talking about International Women's Day.
The Sunday Show on 100 to 102 Today FM.
Welcome back. I'm Aingeala Flannery. You're listening to The Sunday Show. My panellists this morning are Senator Averil Power, Brian O'Donovan, who's the financial correspondent with TV3 News, and Fergal Crehan, barrister. Now, today is International Women's Day, and the Sunday Independent has a piece on page 8 of that newspaper today, and Niamh Horan has asked a group of prominent women what their wish is, how they'd like to improve women's lives on International Women's Day. And there's a recurring theme in here, and better pay, better childcare, and more women in boardrooms, and pulling down the glass ceiling seems to be high on the wish list of people like Joan Burton, Miriam O'Callaghan, Lynn Ruane, who's the new head of the Trinity Students' Union, designer Louise Kennedy, Rosanna Davis, a model, Ronya Shoag, a TV presenter. Now, I'm just wondering, Fergal...
You've decided to start with me on the International Women's Day.
I might as well, yeah. I'm just wondering, in the law library...
Yeah.
How many women are there relative to how many men there are? Is it
the legal profession as a whole has just recently, this year, tipped over and is now predominantly female. The numbers, I would say, are largely at the bottom of the pyramid because there are increasingly large numbers of women coming in at the intake level, but once you move up through the generations, it does thin out somewhat, and that's probably partly because maybe there were fewer women going into the profession, 2 generations ago, 3 generations ago, and partly because women probably fall out along the way. I would say that in particular we do need to see far more female judges and far more female senior counsel and senior partners in the major firms. But it is encouraging at least to see the law is an establishment profession, and it is encouraging to see that at least in terms of raw numbers that we have reached something like equality, although I don't think anyone could pretend that there's equality all the way through the ranks.
And do you think women would make better judges than men?
I don't think women would necessarily make better or worse judges, but I think the judiciary...
Come on, they have to bring something different.
This is exactly it. I think the judiciary would be better as a whole for more women, just like any area would be better as a whole for more female experience. I don't think it means any individual judge would be better, but I just think you get a better quality of thought. It always amazes me when I think of the business culture. The business culture is all about, golf and trips away. And I kind of thought, well, if women ran the world, would people be doing deals in spa hotels or in saunas?
Oh, that's very patronising. And hang on, what do barristers do? They don't play golf.
I don't play golf. But the point I'm making is, why is golf part of the business culture? Because men like golf. And it's absurd. Golf has no part in making deals.
I'm
and
expecting
yet
lady
it does
golfers to text me in furious now.
I just think that if you had more equal input, you wouldn't. There's a lot of things that are taken as normal because they're male things. And actually, they're not at all normal. But if you look at things through a male-centric of the world, it seems absolutely logical that companies would be branding golf balls. But if you look at things through, let's say, a non-golfing perspective, which will more often be female, you'd be like, what the hell are we doing?
Okay.
What the hell are we doing, spending money on this?
Brian, can Fergal borrow your shovel while I talk to Averil about this? Averil, there's also in the Sindo today, a party colleague of yours, a Dublin councillor, Tom Brabazon, says that we need more women in politics who are real women, women with children, women who have had the childbirth experience. Is this Fianna Fáil policy?
I certainly hope not. I think for a public representative to suggest that women who don't have children aren't real women is incredibly offensive. It's also highly insensitive to the many women who've tried for years and can't get pregnant. So I think they're appalling remarks, and I certainly hope that they're not widely held. I don't believe that they are. But I think they should be withdrawn. You should apologise for them.
How are you getting on with the old gender quotient, Fianna Fáil?
It's challenging.
How long have you got? You've got what, until your selection processes? So within the next 6 months,
we've already had, I think, about 20% of our selection conventions. We have the rest to go over the next 2 or 3 months. The party hopes to have all of its candidates selected by May. It's a challenge. It's a big sea change for Irish politics in general, not just for Fianna Fáil, but for the other parties as well. As things stand, 85% of our Parliament, of our Dáil, are male, and that's the way it's always been and hasn't improved.
But Fianna Fáil is contributing massively to that. You don't have a single female TD.
Yeah, and that's something that we need to change. And I mean, we need more women in the judiciary and politics and other decision-making roles, not because we're better, but because we're different. And that representative politics in particular should represent everybody, and you should have people come from a broad range of different backgrounds, different experience. I mean, smart companies have invested massively in gender diversity programs over the last 10 years. People like Accenture, Ernst & Young, companies like that. Not just from, you'd like to think from a quality point of view, but from a business point of view, they get that it's smart for business. Companies that have gender diverse boards do better. Precisely for the reason that they're less likely to suffer from groupthink. You have more awkward voices at the table. If you look at the banking inquiry and you see the streams of witnesses coming in over the last few weeks, to a man, the vast majority of them have been male, and I'm not sure if there have been any high-profile women in yet. And I think that we've seen across our decision-making processes that things go wrong when you have everybody there just agreeing with each other, they're all coming from the same perspective. I think we need to have more challenging of that consensus. If you look at issues like
Are you going around the country now talking to potential candidates, and are you part of these boot camps that I've read about where they're trying to enlist women to join political parties and stand for election?
Fianna Fáil had a women's event yesterday in Dublin in the Dean Hotel in Harcourt Street. There were 80 women at that from all over the country. Fantastic women, community leaders, women with
and what are you telling them
experience.
to make politics more attractive to them, to lure them in?
To me, it's the most fulfilling job in the world. It can be incredibly frustrating sometimes when you work hard on things, as I have, and they don't make it over the line just because it's an opposition idea rather than a government one. But when you do achieve things, it's amazing. I got my adoption bill through the Senate 2 weeks ago. Very rare for an opposition bill to go through, but my bill to give adopted people a right to their birth certs passed unanimously with support from all parties. I went home that night and I reflected on it and thought, this is, for me personally, is the greatest achievement of my life and something I'm really proud of because it affects me personally. I was adopted as a child. I was kept away from my mother, not knowing anything about her till I was nearly 30, and now as a public representative I'm in a position to help the 50,000-60,000 other Irish people who've had that experience. So for me, I have a business degree from Trinity, I have a legal diploma from the King's Inns, I've been offered jobs in other areas that pay more, would get me home earlier in the evening, better quality of life, but none of them would give me that sense of satisfaction of actually achieving and making a difference to people's lives. And that's how I sell politics to other people, male and
is
female.
the party behind you in this when it comes to selecting female candidates? Are we going to see women be put forward and then suddenly they find that actually they're up against someone they're never going to beat?
I think we'll see. I think we'll have to judge all the parties, not just on the number of women that they select and put on tickets, but the number of women that are actually elected and where women are picked to run. They can't be just the second candidate. Woman. Yeah, they can't be the second candidate thrown in to a constituency with an existing TD where we know we're only going to win one seat. Then you run a lot of women who haven't a hope of actually getting elected. We need to be picking strong female candidates who have a realistic prospect of success, and I have no doubt that there are tons of them out there. There are women all over this country in every single constituency that have great experience, life experience, business experience, community experience, who would make fantastic TDs. And now more than ever, Irish politics needs to change. We need that diversity, we need to change in thinking to help turn the country around, and we need to utilise all of our talents, and women make up half the population, and and half our talent base.
Brian O'Donovan, it seems to be childcare is the big issue, and I kind of a bit bemused, I have to say, to note Joan Burton commenting on it in the Sunday Independent today.
Yeah, I like the list of women they've chosen with their wish list, actually. It's a good cross-section. Averil makes the point as well about women in business, and I know my job, big part of it is covering the big job announcements, you know, that the US multinationals make, and it's almost always male CEOs, except for Louise Phelan, who's the vice president of PayPal, and she's a very impressive woman. She's a great speaker. Her wish is here. My wish would be that more Irish women would have a bigger voice in organisations. I also like the contribution of Olivia O'Leary. This is interesting. She says, off the top of my head, we should have paid paternity leave, which would take some of the pressure off moms, which I like. And then Jackie Lavin, the businesswoman and partner of Bill Cullen. My wish would be that women would unite and stop the harsh criticism of each other. Dress for themselves, chill out, and sod the begrudgers, which is a nice wish for her to have.
Miriam O'Callaghan has a lovely quote. It's one that I like. I think it was originally made by Madeleine Albright, US Secretary of State, where she says there's a place in hell reserved for women who don't help other women. There's an interview with Miriam O'Callaghan today in the Sunday Independent magazine where she echoes that. I think those of us, when you get to a position of influence, if you're a female parliamentarian or a female businesswoman like Louise Phelan, it's good to use that opportunity to help other women and to encourage them. And sometimes all it takes is actually pointing out to somebody else that they could succeed and supporting them and being a source of advice, you know, because pulling the ladder up after you means that you're secure, but that you don't actually help anybody else. So I think Louise Phelan, to me, is a great female role model.
She really
She's shown what is possible. As has Miriam O'Callaghan, you know, a huge family. What is she? 8 children, and she still has an incredibly successful job. Again, she has shown what is possible and encouraged other people to chase their dreams.
Now, one of the things that is exercising Irish women, aside from the whole child care issue, although it ties into it, are the cuts to maternity benefit. And one of the reasons that women get annoyed about this is because it means that they have to cut short breastfeeding their children if they have to go back to work. Now, there's a very interesting photograph that emerged during the week.
You say interesting, I would say cringe.
Do you? Well, Brian, if you want to have a look at this photograph, it features the Taoiseach Enda Kenny and Phil Hogan, or the EU Agriculture Commissioner, and a gentleman called Mr. Bergen, who's from Glanbia, and they're bottle feeding babies at a launch in Glanbia earlier this week. The babies look very hesitant, and
Jim Bergen is the only one that is successfully feeding, but I should point out there's a mysterious hand coming in from the side, so it's actually
there is, you're right.
Well,
look, the photograph is up on our Twitter account if you want to have a look at it, so you can go on to @TodayFM Sunday and get a load of this. It's quite something to behold. Go on, Brian.
Phil Hogan looks cross. I think it's because the lid is still on the bottle, so perhaps that's why the baby isn't feeding. Enders is having some success. The baby seems to be feeding. But the breastfeeding group, the La Leche League of Ireland, aren't particularly happy with this because they're saying it's promoting formula milk as opposed to breastfeeding. And Ireland has one of the lowest rates of breastfeeding in the world, I believe. And they said that Enda Kenny should be doing more to promote breastfeeding. But I can tell you,
I don't want to see that photo.
One photograph none of us want to see.
It looks more like force feeding. But the thing about this is people will say, you know, it's one of the biggest contributors to our economy now, producing breast milk for export to China. You know, so you have to weigh it up here and kind of go, look, this is creating a lot of jobs
Huge
and a lot of
jobs.
money, you know, down in Kilkenny and Glanbia. So what do we do? It's going to create 1,600 jobs, apparently.
Well, Phil Hogan was on radio during the week and someone put that to him, and he kind of accepted that most of the health evidence is with breast milk rather than formula milk. And I mean, it's 20 years ago that I was in a first year in college, and there were people boycotting Nestle because they were selling formula milk to the third world, where water is not always safe to drink.
They don't sterilise the bottles,
and it was playing a part in child mortality. And this was put to Phil Hogan, and he kind of said, yeah, but a lot of money to be made in it, which has the virtue of honesty, but I suspect no other virtue than that.
Yes, indeed. Averil, you got any viewpoint on this?
Well, I think it is disappointing to say, and the contrast with breastfeeding is interesting. I think Ireland is one of the lowest rates of breastfeeding in the world, and I think part of that is that women still feel that it's not culturally acceptable that people stare at you and things like that when it's the most natural thing in the world. We've talked about there being so few women in our parliament. We've seen the European Parliament, other parliaments, members breastfeed their children in Parliament, and nobody bats an eyelid. Here, if you even try to do that in a restaurant, someone would say that makes them very uncomfortable. But I think my wish for International Women's Day is that we get to a point where all parents, male or female, have the support that they need to be able to be the parents that they want. You know, paternity leave was mentioned. I think we should, for me, there shouldn't be maternity leave. The whole period should be up to a family to decide how they want to spend it. Just parental leave. If the mother wants to take the first month and then the father takes the rest or whatever, divide it half and half. I think it's in a child's interest to have as much contact as they can with both parents. The maternity cuts you mentioned have been particularly disappointing. Maternity benefit has been hammered. Some women are getting half what they were 2 years ago and being forced to go back to work early as a result. So it's a shame in 2015 to find that women still don't have that choice. You know, we've come a long way from things like the marriage bar when women had to leave their jobs when they got married, or for when there was no such thing as rape and marriage, and if a husband was considered entitled to have sex with his wife against her will. So things have improved in the last few years, but we still have a long way to go.
And only one conviction on that legislation so far, but there you go. I'm going to read out a couple of texts here. Most companies who have gender programmes are after lower paid workers, not to pursue gender equality or any other benefit to the company. And Joe texts in saying, I'm sorry to say that women who had to give up their jobs in the 70s and 80s when they got married are regarded as nobodies when it comes to pension age. Women in the Dáil, wake up. Yes, quite.
They've been cut just in the last, actually. Elderly women in 2012, the government cut their pension entitlements. They brought in a higher average, that you have to have a higher average across your working life, which women who took time out in the 60s, 70s to care for children can't achieve. So a lot of elderly women now have found that they're not getting a full state pension, who 2 years ago would have been entitled to a full state pension, now get half. It's incredibly unfair.
Okay, stay with us. When we come back, we'll be talking about the GAA referee who was banned from wearing a gay wristband in Croke Park.
The Sunday Show on 100 to 102 Today FM.
A gay referee who was asked to remove one of those rainbow wristbands, a gay pride wristband, before refereeing a match last night where he was officiating over the Dublin-Tyrone game in Croke Park. And I was quite surprised by that, Brian. What did you?
So was I, and it's because of the timing of the referendum. By the sounds of it, that it's a political thing. Inter-county official David Goff, he is openly gay. He wanted to wear the wristband as he officiated at the Alliance Football League match between Dublin and Tyrone and Croke Park last night. He wanted to wear it to highlight homophobia and equality in sport, and to let his voice be known in advance of the referendum. And that was the problem. Initially, the GAA said they were okay with it, but then they came back and they said, actually, it's political. The GAA is apolitical and does not allow political gestures. Once the referendum was called, it was impossible for him to do it. So that's interesting, isn't it? That he was originally allowed to do it, but because of the timing of the referendum, it became a political statement, so they withdrew permission.
Is it a political statement?
No, rainbow flag, rainbow ribbons, armbands aren't political. They're not directly, they're far predated the marriage equality referendum. They're just a statement of diversity and equality. They're no different in my mind to the sport against racism symbols. You see football players in the UK wearing anti-racism armbands. I think there's kind of a worrying development where, coming up to marriage equality, any attempt to tackle homophobia or to talk about LGBT,
say anything, isn't it?
You can't say anything. I mean, look at the school debate that we issue that arose a month ago, where an anti-homophobia group who have been doing talks in schools for years, shout out very successful talks in schools around the country against gay homophobic bullying with no issues, were suddenly told by a school principal that the other side had to be heard. So the bullies, the people who are in favour of beating people up in the schoolyard just because they're gay, have to be heard. So I think the marriage equality issue, that's a very separate debate about whether people should be entitled to marry or not, is getting leading to this kind of bizarre 50-50 impression that every issue around LGBT rights, discrimination that people face in society, gay violence, all of that has to be a 50-50 debate. I mean, we're talking about basic human rights here. So I think the GAA have got a little bit wrong here. But to be fair, you know, there have been so many GAA members who've made really positive statements here. Conor Cusack, Donal Hogue, the women's football player.
What do you think about that? I mean, it is the members. I mean, this is GAA, you know, I suppose management, for want of a better word, you know, the suits coming down and making a decision. Doesn't this really fly in the face of work that Conor and Donal Cusack have done and the work that the GPA GAA have done around
I think it does, and I think this Averil makes the point really well that we're now at a stage where you can't even discuss sexuality at all because there's a referendum and now it's political, which is just an absurd idea. And I mean the statement from the GAA, who had they said nothing, very few people would have even noticed the wristband. But they say the GAA is apolitical. The GAA of all organisations is the most political sporting it was founded as a political organisation. So I think it's a bit naive to just say, there's a referendum on, don't talk about this. And I think the membership of the GAA are far, far more liberal than the PR people might acknowledge.
Okay, well, I'm afraid that that's all that we have time for today. Before I let my panellists go, I would like their help in helping me to choose our Artist of the Week. This week, the nominees are contemporary trad group The Gloaming, who won the Meteor Choice Music Prize for Best Irish Album of 2014. Their debut album was also called The Gloaming, and it beat albums by U2, Sinead O'Connor and Hozier to bag the award. Number 2 is Jack White, who this week revealed himself as the mystery buyer who paid $300,000 for the first ever Elvis record. In 1953, a teenage Presley paid $4 to record and cut the vinyl, but left it in his friend's house because his family didn't have a record player. That's so sad, he couldn't listen to his own record. Jack White, anyway, plans to reissue the single on vinyl next month to mark International World Record Store Day. And our final nominee, Hall & Oates, the 80s stars, are suing the Early Bird granola company in New York for naming one of their products Hall & Oates. Sorry. The duo claim it's an obvious play on their copyrighted name and say it suggests that the breakfast cereal is affiliated with or approved by Hall & Oates, which is most certainly not the case. Okay, so Averil, Power, Brian O'Donovan and Fergal Crehan, thanks for joining me. But